Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another edition of Questions and Answers. Today is Saturday, July the 20th. I'm having a hard time believing that it's like almost the end of July already. It seems like we were just celebrating July 4th like 2 days ago, and the summer is just flying by. I don't know where you guys are. I said, but here in upstate New York, it is hot as a motherfucker. Excuse my language. We had it was like 95 yesterday. The humidity has been off the charts here in New York this season, especially like the last month. And today it's supposed to reach near 100 with like 110% humidity or something. It's just absolutely gross. You walk outside, we got the central air going here. You walk outside, you can like slice it with a knife. It's absolutely gross. So when I'm done doing all my taping for you guys, I'm going out in the pool, I think, and it might even be too hot out there. We'll see. So I was going to shoot this show outside today, and I'm like, no way that's happening. So anyway, we got a bunch of questions to get to today. Remember, I'm not going to get to all the questions you guys submitted, but we did have some good ones. There's actually one good question, I think, late in the list here that I'm going to cover, where one of our viewers asks, what kind of questions am I looking for? So I'll kind of get to that when we get there. All right, so the first question from Richard Strickler. Richard asks, with the 50th anniversary of Woodstock coming up in August, I wondered if you'd be interested in doing a worst to best list of all the acts from the Woodstock 1969 festival. Yeah, it is the 50th anniversary, and as you've seen, looks like that big 50th anniversary show that was being planned up in Watkins Glen is not happening. I had a feeling that was going to happen. It's probably for the best. I think they need to stop doing these anniversary shows. Woodstock 69 was what it was. It was legendary for a reason. Just leave it at that, But anyway, so I didn't list every, so I went through this, and this is actually a great question because I'm a big fan of a lot of the bands who played at the original Woodstock and of those performances. I didn't put every one of them on my list because some of them I really haven't heard enough of, or none at all, right? Because you had the performances that were included in the original album and the movie, and they've released some CDs of the full performances, things like that. So I'm basing my list on the stuff that I've heard the most of that I actually kind of like. So starting at number one, this is probably no surprise to anybody who knows me, but I thought Jimi Hendrix's set at Woodstock was absolutely magnificent and by far my favorite. So that comes in at number one. Number two, I love the Who's set. I thought that was one of the Who's best live performances from that time period. I know the band always kind of shits on it and whatever, but man, they were great. Whether they were tripping on acid or not, I don't care. They were fantastic during that set, late into the evening to the early morning, right? Number three, I got to go with Santana. All right, another legendary performance, probably the performance that jump-started their career in a big way. I'm going to give number four to 10 Years After, even though I haven't heard enough of it, but what I've heard of it is really great, so I'm going to give it to them. Creedence Clearwater Revival, I thought played a fantastic concert performance at Woodstock in the middle of the night. Again, I know the band, or specifically John Fogerty, is not a big fan of their performance. I don't know why, because it was really good, really energetic, great set list. Next up, Joe Cocker. Okay. Great performance there. Jefferson Airplane up next. I like their set quite a bit. How about Mountain? Mountain's set was really good. And that was Mountain in their infancy, right? Good stuff. Up next, Johnny Winter. Another guy who really kind of springboarded his appearance at Woodstock to even greater fame. Sly and the Family Stone, I thought were very, very good. Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young. Again, their first big live performance. What a stage for that, right? Janis Joplin, maybe not her best performance, but I still thought it's pretty decent. The Grateful Dead. There's been a lot of criticism for the Grateful Dead's performance at Woodstock, that it was sloppy and disjointed and what have you, and they're probably all tripping their brains off and whatever, but there's a charm about the Grateful Dead live shows from that era, right? And I dig it, right? Paul Butterfield Blues Band, pretty hot that night. Actually, that was in the middle of that was it during the night? Well, they came out before Hendrix, so I'm assuming that was either late evening or early morning, something like that. Canned Heat. I'm not a big Canned Heat fan, but they were pretty good at Woodstock. And then I got to give it to Richie Havens who threw in a pretty spirited performance at Woodstock. So that's all the ones I'm going to comment on, because most of the others I haven't seen or heard enough of them to really form an opinion. I wish I was there. I have two friends who are a little bit older than me that were at Woodstock. Actually, three of them. How cool is that, right? I love asking them stories about it. In fact, one friend of mine, a guy I know from the gym, he went up to Bethel with his buddies on like Thursday, and he was up there from Thursday till Monday afternoon. So he saw every single performance. And I actually was talking to him like 2 weeks ago, and we talked in depth about Hendrix's performance, and he was talking about how only maybe 20,000 people were there when Hendrix was on stage, and it was just absolutely mesmerizing because you can kind of get up close, and everybody was just kind of right around the stage. So just picture like Hendrix playing and enough people that would normally fill Madison Square Garden just right there in front of the stage, and everybody else gone, garbage everywhere and stuff. He said it was amazing. So cool stuff. From Brian Blaze. Hey, Pete, what are your thoughts on Mirrors by Blue Oyster Cult? The tracks and anything else that comes to mind with that album. Very curious on your opinion of that album. Much appreciated. Mirrors is a decent enough album. Probably, arguably, their weakest album up to that point, I think. But there's some good tracks on there, and the whole album's got a great Tom Werman production, I think. I always like the way that album sounds. But perhaps it's a little slick, right? Because I think that is probably the most kind of poppy or commercial sounding album. I'm not saying the songs are definitely that, but there's something about the production. The production is very bright and slick, and a lot of sheen to that album. Good, bad, or ugly, right? Depends on what you like. But Dr. Music is a great tune. The Great Sun Jester I like a lot. In Thee is a great tune. Probably could have been a big single for them, or should have been. I Am the Storm, good tunes. There's some good tunes on there. But compared to the ones that came before it, thankfully they would come back really strong with, back to basics, Blue Oyster Cult with Cultosaurus Erectus and Fire of Unknown Origin. So, was Mirrors a little bit of a bloop? Maybe. A little bit of a blip in the road, but still, it's some good songwriting there. I thought the songs are all pretty memorable and catchy. From David Bella. Hey, Pete. Like you, I have thousands of CDs. With downloads providing the majority of music sales and vinyl slowly catching up to CD sales, I fear that CDs will go the way of 8 tracks and be phased out. Then the next thing it will be difficult to find a CD player, and the ones we own wear out, like I'm finding a VCR now. Yeah. My question is, do you think that CDs will be phased out? And if so, what do we do then? Honestly, I don't think they're going to. They've really never completely phased out anything. Things kind of come and go. I mean, vinyl was dead and buried for, a couple decades, right? Cassettes, which were popular in the 80s, went away for a while. Now you're seeing cassettes coming back. So I think CDs are always going to be there. The problem is, I think a lot of the unsigned artists and bands and what have you and musicians are probably opting not to print their music on CDs, on physical media, and just releasing them, through streaming services and digital downloads. But I think that, if you're signed to a label, there's going to be physical media, and it's going to be CDs, it's going to be LPs, maybe cassettes, So I don't think I hope they don't go away. But yeah, you're right. It is hard to find, good CD players nowadays. I've got a handful of like little CD players all throughout the house. I've got the home theater system. I can play CDs through the Blu-ray player. And I have a CD player in my Toyota 4Runner that I bought in 2015. But like I was in my friend's new car recently, and actually, not my friend, it was my brother. I was in my brother's new vehicle. They bought a Honda Pilot, and I was in it last week, and I'm like, where's your CD player? And he goes, oh, yeah, that doesn't come with one. I'm like, it doesn't come with one? How could you, But that's the thing. So if you're someone who's buying a new vehicle nowadays and you still listen to CDs, you got to request one now. That's not an automatic thing anymore. So, yeah, I don't think they're going to go away, Dave. I just... it's going to be, it's not the norm anymore. But I still have no problem finding CDs. And as you can see, if they were to go away tomorrow, man, I'm in trouble. Because then I got to figure out, well, what do I do next, right? But honestly, I have enough music to last me a lifetime. And then some. So, but, the new things come out, right? So, got to figure it out. But I think we're good. I don't think they're going to go anytime soon. Kind of a somewhat related question from Lucas Beer. You say you've got 15,000 CDs. No, I don't have that many, but it's probably eight and change. My question is, when do you find time to listen to them all? I've got 500, and some of them I haven't listened to for years. Well, you obviously can't listen to all of them all the time, right? I've got a good chunk of them in iTunes, okay, an old iTunes account where that computer fried, right? And I've got like a 16, wait, hold on, 16 gig? Is that what it is? No, wait, I'm drawing a blank on how big the biggest iPod Classic. How many gigs is on that? Ugh, I'm drawing a complete blank, guys. 160 gig? Yeah, 160 gigs. Sorry, not 16. So I have two 160 gig iPods. All right, one which has a good chunk of stuff on there. It's full. That I loaded on there, and that computer is dead, so that iPod can no longer be manipulated. That is what it is. And then on my current computer, my Mac, I've got probably about maybe 80 gigs worth of music on another iPod, so I keep adding to that. So I have a lot of my music on two iPods. Keep on to say iPad. And I use that for when I travel or go into the gym. So I listen to music at the gym every day. So every day I play something different. I'm always pulling stuff off the wall, playing in the car, playing in the kitchen when I'm cooking, that sort of thing, playing it here while I'm, when I work, 'cause I work from home, so I play stuff in the background. But, it can be challenging because a lot of times I am listening to music that we get in for review, so I've got to kind of get up to speed on that, so that's got to compete with stuff that I want to listen to. So generally what happens is, like as background when I'm working, I'll put on new stuff that I have to kind of listen to. It's hard sometimes because you're working, you're concentrating on something else, and you got music in the background. But like on the weekends, when I actually get to sit down and actually do CD album reviews, I listen to a lot of the newer music that's come in because I got to try and digest that. But like, when I'm at the gym, I listen to familiar stuff. When I'm cooking and driving, I listen to familiar stuff most of the time. So it's hard. And yeah, there's probably stuff in my collection that I haven't listened to in a couple of years. Doesn't mean I won't. My wife says that all the time. She's like, you don't listen to half of this stuff. I'm like, yeah, but that's okay. Got to have it, right? Got to have it. From Patrick Crowther. Patrick, also, I want to thank you for all your great feedback and commentary on the Comic Book Geezers show. Patrick's a big fan of what Wild Bill and I do over on Comic Book Geezers. And thank you for all your views over there and all the fun stuff you've been saying. Hey, Pete, great show. Got a question for you. I don't think I've heard you mention Little Feat. Are you a fan? Their first few records are some of the finest of the 70s, in my opinion. I'd like to hear what you think. Yeah, I'm a Little Feat fan. What I really like about Little Feat, there's this little band from like California, right, who have really kind of harnessed a kind of like Southern rock sound through all these years. It's kind of funky, it's kind of Southern sounding, but it's got like that kind of laid back West Coast vibe. I've always liked Little Feat. They're a very unique band, and I like all those early albums. Like, the self-titled album is great. Dixie Chicken, Sailing Shoes, Feet Don't Fail Me Now, the last record album, Time Loves a Hero, and I love that song. Down on the Farm, all great albums, all those 70s albums. I like a lot of their 80s albums and their more recent albums too. And then, of course, you got that fantastic Waiting for Columbus. So whether it's the Lowell George era stuff, which is all great, or the stuff that they've done since he, passed away, great band. In fact, they're playing not that far from me sometime this summer. I'm considering going. They're playing up in Albany, New York, or actually, no, it's Troy, New York, at this little theater. And I'm like, because my kids live up there, and I could go and stay with them and go see the show. So I might do that because I've never seen them live. But really good band. Like great grooves, great rhythms, tasty guitar work, great vocals, just a really fun band. It's like if you look up Little Feat in the dictionary, it should say Little Feat, fun with lots of groove, right? From Raymond Kaiser, Pete, if you could go back in time and prevent the death of any rocker who has already passed, who would that be and why? Raymond, I thought long and hard about this, and I'm probably not going to be able to give you a one-person answer because that just seems to be the case with me. But I debated over choosing someone that I miss so dearly, okay, which would be like, Ronnie James Dio or Gary Moore. But those guys lived, Ronnie was what, almost 70, or was he 70 when he passed away? Gary was almost 60. We would have liked to have had them longer, but they lived pretty long lives. So I got a couple guys here, 4 of them, and I can't really decide on which one, but these guys were all young. They were still in their mid-late 20s and probably had a lifetime of great music and that they could have given us, and things that they wanted to do in their careers that they didn't get to do. So Jimi Hendrix, obviously, Randy Rhoads, Jim Morrison, and Tommy Bolin. All of them were, God, I don't think any of them were over 29, if memory serves me correctly. And it's just, and all four of them, you think, God, what would they have accomplished if they would have lived? So I can't really limit it to just one, but those are the four that instantly came to mind. And I was like, man, would we love to have all four of them back, even just one of them back? If you probably, out of the two, Hendrix, yeah, probably the number one out of those, but, Randy too, because Randy didn't, Tommy did a whole bunch of things, right? Jim Morrison had all those albums with the Doors, and I think, Jim, God, if we could have gotten him on the straight and narrow, who knows what he would have done throughout the 70s. But, man, Randy was just getting started. And, for all intents and purposes, so was Jimmy, kind of. Jimmy had the couple of studio albums and a whole bunch of live releases. I mean, we've got so many Hendrix releases since he passed away, and he did a lot in those just couple, few years. But, man, wouldn't have been nice to get another decade out of Jimmy, if not, obviously, more. Could you imagine if we still had Jimmy around today? Woo. From Johnny Perot. Hey, Pete, I know you like prog. Now I've been listening to UFO pre-Schenker recently, and they sounded more like Hawkwind than UFO as most people know them. What's your opinion on their early work? I mean, I dig it. I don't think those early UFO albums, those first two, are quite as interesting as Hawkwind, to be honest with you. I like them. To me, they're like blues rock albums with some kind of a little bit of space rock textures, because they did a lot of experimenting. They had Mick Bolton on guitar, who was an interesting player. No Schenker, completely different, but an interesting player nonetheless. And their song structures were different. They went for more of like a looser vibe. They didn't go for all the kind of electronics and synths and all the weird noises and stuff like Hawkwind did, but I think they had a similar mentality, musically speaking. But it's good stuff. I occasionally pull those albums out, listen to them. They're kind of cool. There's some good bluesy, hard rock on some of those albums. I dig them. It's a band in its infancy, still trying to find its way, right? And they needed kind of like fresh blood in the band to really realize the direction they were going to go into. But it's good stuff. I mean, I think any UFO fan needs to have those two albums and even that early live album. So, from Joseph Wegersen. Hope I'm saying that right, Joseph. Pete, what was the best band you saw live and what was the worst? Mine, the best was Pink Floyd, 1977. The worst, Rolling Stones in 78. All right, so for worst, I'm going to name two of them, and they were on the same bill, and they were both so goddamn awful. It has stuck with me all these years. Rat and Poison in 1987 at the Mid-Hudson Civic Center in Poughkeepsie, New York. Just terrible. I mean, granted, this was a time I went to this show. I was a big thrash fan at the time. 87 is when thrash was really hitting big, and I still like a lot of regular metal stuff, but I was really becoming like a complete thrash head by that time. But I liked Rat. I never was much on Poison, but I liked Rat. And so I went to this show, and Rat headline, Poison opened up. I thought Poison were terrible. I just don't really care for their music. I thought they were sloppy and juvenile, and just didn't do anything for me. And then Rat was a complete disappointment. It seemed like most of the guys on stage were all drunk off their ass. They were sloppy. The timing was off. It's just not a pretty show by any means. And I just walked out of there. I'm like, why the fuck did I go to the show? God, that was terrible. And all these years later, I mean, I've seen some kind of shitty bands here and there, but that's the one that still stands out. And that was, God, over 30 years ago. I have two for I picked two for the best because I couldn't decide between each one of them. I thought Metallica in 1986, opening up for Ozzy Osbourne on the Master of Puppets tour when Cliff was still alive, was absolutely incredible. They, still to this day, and I've seen a lot of great bands. But when you're asked this question, you don't want to sit and think for hours on end. Geez, what was the best? You got to go with what instantly comes to you because that made a mark on you, right? That really affected you. The fact that you can, just like that, remember a band, and it could have been 35 years ago, but you remember how great they were. Metallica in 1986, okay, on that tour, they came out, and absolutely destroyed. I saw them at the Brendan Byrne Arena in East Rutherford, New Jersey, and the place went batshit crazy. And they came out there, and I think they played an hour, and man, they just destroyed. I mean, how Ozzy even came out after that, I have no idea. But I remember we were so, like, just absolutely crazed after that performance. And you talked about it for ages after that, right? So that's how hot Metallica was right around that time period. Again, this is right before Cliff died. Fantastic. The other band, for me, was Dream Theater, 1999, on the Scenes from a Memory tour, specifically the old Roseland Ballroom in New York City. I just, right place, right time, right album. They just, Jordan Rudess joins the band. They release Metropolis 2, Scenes from Memory. Great album. They play the whole thing live at the Beacon Theater. 1999, I was there with all my buddies. We were all drinking up a storm, having a great time. The place was jam-packed. Dixie Dregs opened up, who were great. And just Dream Theater just absolutely nailed that entire album. Note for note. Played a bunch of other favorites, and it just was a perfect show. And they were just so fantastic. That was Dream Theater at the height of their powers. They're still great today, but man, that was just fantastic. Just a show you never forget, right? So, but there's a lot of them. Those are just two that really kind of stood out for me. From David Rowe. Although I have been a fan of Lynyrd Skynyrd for over 40 years and finally got to see them live in 2014 on the one and only visit to New Zealand, I have only recently started to enjoy Southern rock. Blackstone Cherry, Government Mule, Whiskey Myers, the Allman Brothers, Molly Hatchet, etc. Do you have a plan to do a show about Southern rock for viewers like me who are recent converts, as there may be other great Southern rock bands we have not discovered yet? For me, with Skynyrd about to retire, Blackstone Cherry, the new standard bearer for Southern rock. That's a great question, David. And yes, I have been planning on doing a kind of like history of Southern rock show for a long time. You know what? Now's a good time to do it because it's summertime. We're all listening to Southern rock in the summer. And yeah, I'm a big Southern rock fan. I like so many Southern rock acts. It's crazy, whether it's Blackfoot, Molly Hatchet, Skynyrd, Allman Brothers, Charlie Daniels Band, 38 Special, a lot of the Wet Willie, a lot of the obscure stuff. Rosinta Collins Band, Government Mule, Blackstone Cherry, certainly one of the best ones out there now. Whiskey Myers is a good band. There's God, so many great ones. So yeah, I'm going to do a history of Southern rock, according to me. I'm going to try and put that near the top of my list. I want to try and get to that like sooner rather than later because I think that was a perfect time for it. So great question. Thank you. Tate Davis. Hello, Pete. Great video as always. What is your opinion on the Kinks Preservation Acts 1 and 2 albums? I don't seem to hear about those albums from many people that much. I think they're pretty damn good. Hell yeah, they're pretty damn good. I think they're very underrated concept albums. I think the reason why... Hold on a second. I think the reason why you don't hear a lot of people talk about them when they talk about, concept albums and great albums from the 70s is I think, those albums are really British sounding. A lot of those Kinks albums from that time period, they're really British sounding. And I think especially to, rock listeners here in the U.S., that kind of goes over a lot of people's heads. And I think those albums, you listen to them, they're fun albums, but yeah, you really got to pay attention to what's going on in those albums. I think a lot of the stuff that Ray was kind of writing about and putting into those albums just really went over people's heads. And it's a shame, because you go back and listen to them now, pretty cool stuff on there, right? There's a lot of good songs, some great pop melodies on those albums, some good rock and roll on those albums. There's some, especially on the second part, there's some almost like prog rock stuff going on there, right? And I think those albums has some of Ray's best vocals. There's a lot of cool backing vocals on there. Those are really rich albums from both lyrically, vocally, and instrumentally speaking. And I'm glad you brought that up because I hadn't listened to those in a while, and I was listening to them this morning like, yeah, damn, these are just as good as I remember them. The Kinks have a lot of really underrated albums, from the late 60s through to the late 70s. Really good stuff. Great question, Tate. From L. Franklin. Hi, Pete. It's been a while since I've asked anything. Piggybacking on the question about advice for making these videos. What do you use to record your shows? All right, so I got to tell you, this is like guerrilla filmmaking at its best. All right, I'm happy to divulge because there's not much to divulge. All right, I've got a little MacBook Pro laptop, which is amazing. I urge anybody who's still using, Dells and HPs and all that other nonsense, get rid of them. Go out and get yourself a MacBook Pro. You're going to pay a little bit more money for it, but man, I've been using this. This is a workhorse. I have been using it. I've had this for like, what, 6 years? 7 years? Or thereabouts. I've got a work one too that my company gave me, and that's what started me on this whole thing. I have never had anything go wrong with this laptop. It records I literally I record it right in here. It's got the little movie app, right? And it's got the camera. I use the internal mic most of the time. Sometimes I futz around with, Bluetooth headsets and whatever. The mic does really well. I'm actually going to go buy a professional microphone real soon, though, because I want like a little better audio. But man, the picture is usually great. Try to get good lighting. I try to shoot most of my stuff early in the day or in the afternoon, because you have the natural light coming through the windows and the artificial light that you put overhead. So I have other lightings that I put around. I tend to try not to do much at night, because I tell you, it's really hard to get good lighting when you have no natural light coming in through the windows of your room, your studio, your house, whatever you're using. So it's very simple, but it works. I'm telling you. All the rumors you've heard are true about Macintosh computers, man. They're just quality. It's quality, I'm telling you. So yeah, this is real. This is low budget stuff, guys, but it works. For now, when I start making some decent money doing this, then I can invest in some, different equipment, or upgrade a little bit. But we're not quite there yet. And so yeah, this is hopefully fun recording on a shoestring budget, I guess. Guerrilla filmmaking, right? From Jamie Laszlo. So what do you think of the new Opeth song, Heart in Hand? And do you think it works best when it's sung in English or in Swedish? All right, so Jamie and I have already been kind of sharing little opinions on the Opeth song. I have with a bunch of you on the Facebook page and stuff like that. So I'm a huge Opeth fan, and I can't wait for this new album. So I think that song is fucking great. All right, it's a really good tune. I have plenty of CDs from bands, whether they be prog or hard rock or whatever, who are from Sweden, who have recorded, their albums in the Swedish language, and I don't mind listening to them all at all. Mr. Ackerfeldt has a great voice, whether he's singing in Swedish or in English. And I'm pretty sure the new album is going to come out with the entire album sung in Swedish and the entire album sung in English. I don't think you have to buy them separately, if I remember correctly what I read. I like both of them, obviously. They sound great. Hearing him in his native tongue sounds great. Hearing him in English, obviously the one that I'm going to listen to the most when I get it is the English one, obviously. But if they had decided to record it only in Swedish and release it that way, I'd listen to it, because musically it's great stuff, right? And then you hear his vocals are it's like another instrument. I mean, he's got some lovely clean vocals. He used to be a fantastic death metal growler. He doesn't do that anymore. I've always liked hearing him sing, regardless of how he wants to do it. So yeah. So if the CD comes out and it's got one CD all in English, one CD all in Swedish, I would certainly listen to the Swedish one a few times, but I'm sure I'll get most plays out of the English one. But regardless, if you haven't heard Heart in Hand by Opeth, go out and check it out. It's great. I think the album comes out September 27th, so it's coming up. From Thomas Sharpless, as always, love the show. Thank you, Thomas. I appreciate that. My question today is about bands, artists that have surprised you the most in your life. I think we've all bought albums for one or two songs we had heard, but we're disappointed by the rest of the album. I mean, yeah, it happens, unfortunately. On the other hand, there are many albums that are truly inspiring in a good way. Shooting Stars' Hang On For Your Life album, that's a great one, or Touch by the band Touch come to mind. I purchased these two albums back in the early 80s expecting one or two good songs, but was pleasantly surprised by how strong the entire album was. In fact, I still regularly enjoy listening to these entire albums. My question is, can you think of albums that have truly inspired you, exceeding your expectations? Well, you know what? Instead of naming specific albums, I'm going to talk about two bands and one kind of solo guy who I never really had anything more than either anything at all or a greatest hits set that I kind of wanted to explore a little bit beyond there, and then I found their albums absolutely captivating, all of them. So the first is Steely Dan. So for many years, I mean, I'm like everybody else. I grew up on AM and FM radio, and I remember hearing Steely Dan all the time, and I always liked the songs I heard. Ricky Don't Lose That Number is it is my favorite Steely Dan song, and I've always loved it. And, Peg and Josie and, all those other tunes, right? But I got, in the 80s, I went and bought, a double disc late 80s. I bought like a double disc Steely Dan compilation that had all of their most well-known songs, and I really liked them a lot, you know. And I started thinking, I'm like, Jesus, this was probably like maybe a decade or two ago, and I started thinking, it's like, you know what? It's like, there's got to be more than this, right? It's like they have all those albums, and it's like, you know, and these songs are great, but what else do they got? So I went and bought like one or two. I think I got Asia and the Royal Scam, or maybe one, or Katie Lied. I don't remember which one. And I was like, holy crap, every song on this is great, right? And I went and I bought everything. It's got every album they ever did. And I was amazed at how, yeah, the hits are great, but all those deep cuts are just as good, right? And I did the same thing not long ago with 10cc. In fact, if you watch the 10cc Top 10 Song Show I did with Jeff Young, my good buddy Jeff from X of Megadeth, I kind of talked about that, how, you know, I always liked those couple of hits from 10cc all throughout when I was growing up and through the 80s and everything like that. And then I bought a 10cc, you know, greatest hits set, which I really liked. And then, you know, I started talking to people. It's like, oh, yeah, they had some really good albums, a lot of really good songs that were not hits. And I was like, all right, so I bought like one or two of them. And I was like, holy shit, you know, there's a lot of great songs here. It's like, you know, 10cc is not all about, you know, I'm not in love and things we do for love, right? So that, you know, there's that. And so I got to mention Jeff again. So Jeff, just a couple weeks ago, on his Music Without Boundaries show, played a bunch of Dan Fogelberg tunes. And he had asked me when I was with him, when I recorded the last show with him, when I appeared on the last show with Jeff, he asked me, he goes, so do you dig Dan Fogelberg? And I'm like, you know what? I know the song Longer, and I always loved that song, but I couldn't tell you another fucking Dan Fogelberg song, right? So he's like, oh man, the guy's genius. He was absolute genius. And, you know, I always thought like Dan Fogelberg was kind of like, you know, a folk guy, you know, whatever. I'm not a huge folk guy, but Jeff played like 4 Dan Fogelberg tunes on his radio show. And two of them really rocked, had great like electric guitar work on there. And the songs were kind of cool and enchanting with pop melodies and stuff. I'm like, holy crap, this is really good. So I went and bought like most of, if not all of the Dan Fogelberg CDs that he released in the 70s, because they're cheap. You can get them for like $4. And I'm amazed at how good they are. Like really, really cool. You want to know which ones? Hold on a second. I'll grab them. Hold on a second, guys. What do we got here? All right, so this is what I picked up. So I got, you know, Souvenirs. All right. I got the, what's it, Home Free. I have not listened to this one yet. This was great. Phoenix. This is Longer's on this one. There's some great tunes on here. Windows and Walls. Okay. The double disc, The Innocent Age. This is really good. In fact, these have a couple tunes. Jeff played Empty Cages, which is fantastic. And that's a nice rocker. It's got a lot of great textures. It's kind of proggy in spots. And Ghosts, which is great on here. A lot of the really good tunes. This has got 2 Captured Angel and Netherlands. I have not listened to this one yet. I just recently got these. And then the album he did with Dan Fogelberg and with Dan and Tim Weisberg, twin sons of different mothers, which is cool too. So, you know, again, only knew a song, right? That at least I thought, right? And then was just surprised at how good a lot of the other material is. So don't always go by first impressions. And a lot of times you hear a song you really like by an artist or a band and you think there's really nothing else. I guarantee you there's more, right? So great question, Jamie. No, Thomas, sorry. From AZDH85224. Wolfmother is one of the newer bands that I like. It is surprising that they have not had more success. I thought Cosmic Egg from 2009 was a perfect album and was really surprised it did not get any mention for Rock Grammy or at least more airplay. New Moon Rising is a fantastic song. I think that Andrew Stockdale is a great talent, but the constant rotation of players into the band may hurt them. What is your opinion on why they did not make it bigger? Well, here's the deal. I think when Wolfmother first came out with that first album, they were a buzz band. Absolutely were a buzz band. And you know, we talked about this, I think, in last week's episode. People, especially younger music fans, or just younger fans in general, they don't even need to be big music fans. Nobody has attention span anymore to stick with anything for too long. So if you are a newish band and you release, like, say, a debut album, and it does pretty well, because they were getting played on the radio, people were talking. I remember my son was like, you know, and he's he's going to be 31 now, so this was, how many years ago? So he was in his early 20s, and he's like, oh, you like this band Wolfmother? I love those 2 songs that they're playing, and I was like, yeah, this is really good, because I like Wolfmother because they're kind of, they've got that kind of 70s hard rock style, which I really like, but their music is really catchy. And it took forever to come out with that second album, So I think by the time Cosmic Egg came out, it was 4 years too late, or however many, it was a few years in between or something like that. And it's just like, you can't wait that long. So between the first and second album, there was like a 4-year gap. People have already moved on to other things. And yeah, Cosmic Egg is a great album, but, then it took him another bunch of years to release the third album. And then he basically got rid of the whole band, Stockdale did, and released it as a solo album. All right. There was a New Crown. And then it took, and that was, what was that, 2011 or whatever year it was, 2012, 13, whatever it was. And then, so now basically that whole band we got to know from the first 2 albums are basically gone. And then, he comes back with the stripped down sound. And then, he put out in 2016 that Victorious album, which is actually pretty damn good. But again, it's basically like a solo album. It's just him playing everything on it. And it's just, so it's like, it's barely a band at this point. And I just think that, look at all those years in between. Wolfmother should have been huge. Should have been huge. But you have to strike while the iron is hot. If you're a young band out there today and you release an album and it does fairly well, you can't take 4 years to come back with another one. You just can't. Either that or you got to tour constantly, okay, in between. But you can't, because people forget very quickly nowadays. Here today, gone tomorrow. I'm telling you, that's what happens. If you're gonna take 4 or 5 albums between releases, nobody's gonna care. They're gonna forget about you. All right, especially if you're going for a younger audience. Not everybody's like me, who will sit around and wait 4 years and say, "Oh, finally, that came out. Yes." All right. Not everybody's like that anymore. From Mean, Mr. Musician. Hey, Pete, love the channel. What is your opinion on Hall & Oates? I'm a fan of theirs, mostly their early albums. Hall Oates, Abandoned Luncheonette, and War Babies. To a certain extent, the lyrics are a little hard to understand. I don't have any Hall & Oates albums, okay, or CDs. I have like an amazing 2-disc greatest hits set, which, I mean, every song is fantastic. I have never gone to go buy Hall & Oates albums, but I always love their songs, okay? Everything I ever heard by them, I mean, they're just, the Hall & Oates, it's like, how can you not be like a person from the U.S. and not love Hall & Oates? For them, I mean, for me, they were like kind of like the soundtrack to my youth. The Hall & Oates were always on the radio. No matter what album they put out, they were huge. They were huge in the 80s, huge in the 70s, still did stuff into the 90s. I mean, just a great band with great songs. They know how to write songs. Right, so I never ventured. I mean, and maybe I should. Right, same thing with the Dan Fogelberg thing. And maybe at some point I'm just going to wake up and say, you know what, I'm going to go out and get a bunch of Hall & Oates albums, and I might do that. You never know. Me, Mr. Musician's second question. Also, were you a fan of That Metal Show on VH1 back in the day? I used to watch it a lot as a 9-10-year-old kid. Oh, you're pretty young, dude. Okay, yeah, it obviously is not exactly a show for 9-10-year-old kids. No. Yeah, and that wasn't that long ago. So, God, how old are you? That Metal Show was not on that long ago. You must be barely 20. Anyway, okay, well, that's cool. It's great to see, like, kind of teenagers watching my show. I got asked an Eddie Trunk question last week, and Eddie does his thing. He does it well. Eddie's very different from me. I actually watched a handful of That Metal Show episodes. I didn't watch it every week, but I've probably seen at least a half a dozen of them, which I realize is a small portion. But, for me, he had a lot of the same guests on over and over and over again. And I found the shows kind of formulaic a little bit. But it was cool to see nonetheless, because, it's just, if you're someone who's into hard rock and metal, it's good to see any kind of show on either a VH1 or MTV that kind of focuses on the music we love and the bands we love and has these guests on and stuff. So what I really enjoyed about That Metal Show, which I thought was the coolest thing, is like every week he would have like a different like guitar player as the kind of, the musical conductor, and would sit up there as they go to commercial break and come back from commercial break playing stuff. And I thought that was really cool. I don't know if he did that every single episode, but he did on a lot of the ones that I saw. So a cool show for what it was. I think it kind of ran its course, but You know, I personally, if I were going to do a show like that, if I were asked to do a show like that, I think I would do it a little bit differently, but cool for what it was, right? From Michael Morgan, thank you, Pete, for answering my question last week. Now, I'm not a musician, but I do appreciate music and instruments. My favorite bands are Rush, ELO, Thin Lizzy, Moody Blues, Alan Parsons Project, Jethro Tull, basically prog and synth and orchestral sounds. My question is this. There are many bands or artists that weren't very big nationwide or globally, but huge in local areas. The best example is Jerry Riopelle, who is huge out west, particularly in Arizona. What are your favorite bands that had great local success that nobody else has heard of? Love the simplicity of your show. You don't pussyfoot around and you speak your mind. Awesome. Thank you, sir. Well, I mean, I guess I would just have to speak for New York in general because it's not like I spend a hell of a lot of time in other parts of the country. But, you know, and these two bands I'm going to mention are not unknown, but I think that New Yorkers know them better, right? The Good Rats, you know, notorious for playing all over New York State for so many years. And I think most people from New York know and love the Good Rats. You talk to people from around the rest of the world, and they're kind of like, they've heard them, maybe heard a couple tunes, but don't know them like New Yorkers do. A really, really good band, especially got Long Islanders, you know, adore the Good Rats. And then the other band is Zebra. Again, a band that is known throughout the world, but I don't think they're known like New Yorkers. I mean, Zebra plays still to this day, but, you know, all throughout when I was growing up, Zebra played everywhere. Everywhere. I mean, Christ, I mean, the last time I saw Zebra, I saw them in this tiny little place, and they were awesome, you know. And I think that Zebra, even though they have the 2 albums, I think, you know, the first album was a great debut, and then they kind of never really followed that up. The second album was decent, but and then they kind of, you know, have they recorded anything? You know, they've just been very quiet on the recording scene, but they've been like a live functioning band for so long. But they just always play around New York, and I think that New Yorkers always have a really soft spot for Zebra that maybe other parts of the country don't. And I could be wrong there, but I'm just kind of saying that as a New Yorker. But good question. I'm sure there's more if I could really think about it. From Mike N. Pete, thanks so much for everything you do. Question, do you occasionally find a case where there is a song that really clicks with you and you do give the rest of the artist's catalog fair consideration, but even after that, you still find that single song is your touchstone and the rest of the music you still don't have interest in? I have this situation going on with Men at Work, their song Overkill, Primal Scream Rocks, Supertramp, The Logical Song, and Ministry Thieves. Am I the only weird one? No. And you know, I could probably come up with some more, but one like really jumped to mind, and it's actually fairly recent, so it's why it kind of jumped to mind. But I decided to give XTC a try, probably, I don't know, it was either earlier this year or late last year, or maybe over the span of a couple months, and I picked up like most of their albums on CD because I really always liked Senses Working Overtime and also Making Plans for Nigel. Those are 2 great songs, right? And so many people are like, oh my God, I can't believe you don't listen to XTC. You should love them, you know, based on everything else you like, blah, 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 blah. So I decided, all right, I'm going to go out and do it. So I've been like really trying to get into the music of XTC over the last like 8 months. And I don't dislike it, okay? It just hasn't really grabbed me yet, like those 2 songs do. And some of their albums are really cool, you know, and I got them, and I put them on every so often, and I listen to them, I'm like, yeah. But, you know, I don't go back for a lot of repeat spins. I find that I'm forcing myself to go back and listen to them because I'm trying to force myself to, you gotta like this, because I trust the opinions of so many people who are telling me that it's music that I should like, but it hasn't quite clicked with me yet. That's not to say that it won't, because I'm still going to keep trying. But that's a perfect example, right? You like 2 tunes or 1 tune in particular, and you're hoping you like the rest of the catalog the same, and it doesn't quite happen that way. From John Wilson, Pete, which Dutch bands are good to get into? I got into Golden Earring. Okay. How about Earth and Fire? Great prog band. Ayreon, Ayreon. The Gentle Storm. Focus, Vandenberg, for more like symphonic metal. Here's some metal stuff, right? Symphonic metal with a little bit of clean female vocals and some death metal male vocals. Epica, Within Temptation, symphonic metal. After Forever, also symphonic metal. They're not around anymore, but they have some great albums. The Gathering, okay, for proggy, older proggy stuff. Super Sister and Kayak. All right. From Kill Metal, Pete, I hope this isn't an inappropriate question to ask, but that massive music collection you have, did you purchase most of it or is some sent from record companies? Is it 50-50, 70-30? Just curious. Great channel, by the way. Really like the album wars. Very interesting challenges. I would say probably It's probably 80-20 that I bought. Okay, maybe 75-25, 80-20. The majority I have purchased myself. I have gotten a lot from record labels and bands over the years, absolutely. But, you know, I get a ton of stuff on CD from bands and labels, and a lot of it I don't keep. I give it away. I'm usually, every time I see friends or whatever who are music lovers, like, oh, they're like, oh, here comes Pete giving free CDs again. Because that's like, you know, you got to give the gift of music, right? And I just can't keep everything. If I kept everything that was sent to me, I would have like 20,000 CDs. I just can't do it. So I give a lot of stuff away. But yeah, most of what you see up there I bought. Okay, I spend a lot of money on music and have for many, many years. From Jiff882, Pete, do you not listen to a lot of music that you used to listen to when you were younger? The reason that I'm asking is that because I just realized that I'm turning 37 this year in October, and I'm wondering if I'll be enjoying the same music a few years down the line. I'm talking about stuff like Iron Maiden, Metallica, and Megadeth. I would say probably 90% of what I listen to today, I was listening to when I was your age and when I was half your age. So, you know, I mean, if you saw my top 30 favorite bands, you know, from yesterday, I mean, most of those bands I've been listening to most of my life. I listen to a ton of stuff that I loved when I was a kid. There's not a lot of bands that I really was into when I was younger that I just don't like anymore and don't listen to. So yeah, I'm hoping that you 10 years from now, 20 years from now, you're still listening to the stuff that you like today and that you liked 10 years ago. That's just that, you know, that's who I am. I still listen to, I'm very loyal to my bands that I've been into in my life. Always have been. From Matty Boy Walker, can you recommend any of the Asia albums with John Payne on vocals? For me, it's always been Wettin' or Nothing. And what is your opinion of the Downs Payne-led version of the band? It's decent. Oh, I just realized about 45 minutes on the show. I kind of want to do this short today. Oh, well. Those are some pretty solid bands. I mean, solid albums that they released with Downs and Payne. And there's good material on all of them. The only ones I've heard, and that's most of them, but Aria from '94 is actually pretty strong. Again, they're different. They're a little more kind of hard rock than the the more poppy first couple of Asia albums, but they're good. Not overly proggy. Arena from '96 is a strong album. I like the Silent Nation album from 2004, and Aura from 2001 is pretty solid. They're solid albums. I mean, John Payne is a good vocalist, right? It just doesn't sound like a lot like those first two Asia albums, but that's, you know, no Wettin', not going to sound the same. But those are good. I would investigate those. They're very strong. From MBF78, back with another question. I hope it makes the cut. If it doesn't, at least I tried. Your videos focus a lot on hard rock, prog metal, and the like. What I would like to know is your opinion on other subgenres and styles that go under the rock umbrella or at the edges of it. Maybe you've been asked about this before, and if you have, I apologize. So, for example, what's your take on the 70s glam rock scene? Bands like T-Rex, Slade, Sweet, Cheap Trick, even Queen. I think were classified under glam rock for a while. A lot of solo acts too, like David Bowie or Brian Eno, who later turned to ambient music, but can't fault him for that. Yeah, I've actually asked this question. I've been asked this question a lot before, but I'll tackle it here. I like T-Rex. I'm not a huge fan. I have a T-Rex compilation I dig. I don't listen to it that often. It's good. Slade, I own nothing by Slade. And I've been asked probably more than anything else, any other band, from viewers about Slade over the years. And I don't own any Slade. I've gone and listened to a bunch of their albums, like here on YouTube. It doesn't do a hell of a lot for me. I know there's a lot of fans out there. It doesn't do a lot for me. And you can't like everybody. Sweet, I love quite a bit. I have all the Sweet releases. I'm planning on doing a Sweet top 10 songs at some point. I dig Sweet. Sweet's kind of glammy, but kind of early on they were a bubblegum pop band. They became a great hard rock band. So great stuff there. Cheap Trick, I don't really call Cheap Trick a glam band. I love Cheap Trick. I have all the early Cheap Trick albums, some of their later ones. Great band. Queen, as you all know, I totally love Queen. And I'm a David Bowie fan. I love David Bowie. Brian Eno, I've never really listened to any of his solo stuff, but he's played on a lot of other albums that I own that I like. So, I like some of the glam stuff. I definitely do. From William Gainford. Hey, Pete, it is with great difficulty I bring this up, as he is my favorite singer of all time, along with Ronnie Dio. But David Coverdale's performance at Download last week, his voice is now a flat hoarse croak, a shadow of what it used to be. What do you think? Should he retire if he can't do his job, or should we overlook his band carrying him? People have been accused on social media of being disrespectful to him by criticizing him. I'd appreciate your opinion on this. I hate to say this, but I think he should give it up. I know he's late 60s now and looks great, but sadly he can't sing anymore. All right, well, this hits home with me because, as you know, he's also one of my favorite singers of all time. You know, I've seen Whitesnake a few times in recent years. I've had the luxury of seeing them early on in the tours, okay? And he sounds great. Does he sound like David Coverdale of 1986? No. Does he sound like the David Coverdale of 1976? No, absolutely not. But he's a upper 60s guy who is doing the best he can. He's got a band. Everybody else in the band sings backing vocals, so they can give you that presentation. He does the best job he can. I agree. I have heard performance clips on YouTube of him or the band, you know, later in tours, and he doesn't sound very good. But, you know, if you're a 67-year-old man and you're up there shrieking every night, you know, and you're doing 40 tour dates, you know, how's your voice going to hold out? So, you know, and William, I know you get this. So I just, so my opinion, as long as he feels he can continue on, where at least the majority of the tour he sounds pretty decent, I'm okay with that. If it gets to the point where even like at the beginning of a tour, he can't cut the mustard, then maybe it's time to walk away. I don't think that he's going to be long for touring. I think there's still enough interest in Whitesnake. They're putting out great albums. I mean, he sounds great on the albums, right? I'd be quite okay if they just continued to make studio albums and maybe only did a handful of tours a year, or maybe did a couple festivals here and there. Because, you know, does David Coverdale need to do, you know, 50 dates a year anymore or more? Probably not, right? But I love him. He looks great up there. He's such a cool guy. Have you seen any recent interviews with him? The guy he's awesome, right? He's a total rock star. And yeah, I want to enjoy him as long as I can. So I've been lucky. The last couple of times I've seen him, he sounded really good. But I've heard from other people that on other shows he hasn't. So yeah, I don't think he's going to do it too much longer, to be honest with you. I think if we get maybe another tour out of him, that might be it. But I think, honestly, my opinion, I think Whitesnake and Coverdale would be better if they kept recording albums and maybe they just did a handful of appearances throughout the world each year instead of doing like long tours, because it's hard. But they're making good money. They're packing them in here in the States. They pack them in wherever they play. So, from Drum Music Inc., Pete, you are very influential as far as what I buy or don't buy. I sometimes check YouTube before I order stuff. Sometimes I just go on your approval. My question is this: is there someone in your life who you could hear say, "This is great, get it," and you would based on that person's opinion only? Thank you for all you do. God, you know, most of my friends come to me looking for recommendations. Honestly, I'm not saying this to, you know, toot my own horn, but I am exposed to a lot more music than most of my friends. So they usually come to me asking, "Hey, what about this? What about this? What's new on your plate that you'd recommend to me?" That type of thing. I will say one person who has kind of come into my life not that long ago, my good friend Jeff Young. I generally, when he recommends something to me, I jump all over it. Okay, and I think he does the same when I recommend stuff. So usually if he tells me, I mean, you know, he was the one who was tooting this Dan Fogelberg stuff. I jumped all over. He's really the guy who got me listening to a lot of the Guthrie Govan and the Aristocrats stuff a couple months ago, and I'm glad he did. So, you know, it's great to have someone who you really trust their musical opinion. But I would say amongst a lot of my other longtime friends, they come to me. They come to me because they're just not out there, you know, investigating new stuff, and I'm the one who usually gets that initial exposure to anything that's new. Last but not least, from Raymond Kaiser. Pete, I would like to ask many questions, but I have no idea what you consider thought-provoking and intelligent versus nonsensical and stupid. Please dedicate some time on a future show and elaborate on questions, topics we can ask that will get you to respond. And I hope you don't consider my request to be stupid. Cheers. Not at all, Raymond. I mean, basically, hopefully you've been listening to the last bunch of episodes and you see that I'm weeding out a lot of questions, because I still get a lot of people that are like, "Pete, what about," you know, and they name a band with a question mark. And I'm like, "Well, what about them?" You know, it's like, what about them? Because that's a lot of the old questions I used to get and I used to answer on our shows, which made these episodes an hour and a half long. It's like, "Pete, what about this band?" And I'd be like, "Okay, this band. All right. Yeah, they're okay. What else you want to know?" Right? And I mean, I get all sorts of questions, and I get a lot of repeat questions, a lot of them. And I understand we've done a lot of these episodes, and a lot of them are lengthy, and I get that. So if you don't hear me answer your questions, sometimes what I'll do is I'll go in to the comments, and I'll actually write you, and I'll say, yeah, I've answered this one before. Here's my thoughts on this, or go check out this episode, of whatever. And I get a lot of the questions I got this week are like, Pete, can you do a classic album or between these two albums? Pete, can you do a top 10 songs on this band? I get a lot of that stuff. I like questions that make me think. In some cases, make me do a little research, okay, and make for a good discussion. I love kind of really having to think about stuff. That's why I don't like the, Pete, what's your opinion on this band type of thing. It's like, because, that was what I used to do with this show back in the beginning. I got like a million questions of that. Now, what I would be doing is going on YouTube and investigating bands, investigating albums that I'd never heard before, and listening to them and say, okay, yeah, that was okay. All right, next, move on. And it's like, that's not fun for me. I mean, although I do like getting exposed to bands, all right? I do. But when 50% of the questions are all that, I don't have the time for that. So that's why I appreciate when people ask questions about genres that I'm, into and have knowledge on, bands that I'm into, all that kind of stuff, history of music and movements and genres and all that kind of stuff. And it's because that's cool for me. I think hopefully if you've been watching the last couple of episodes, you kind of get the feel for what I really want out of questions and what I like to answer and talk about. So anyway, this one went a lot longer than I wanted to. I was kind of hoping for 40 minutes or less, but we're just under an hour. So anyway, this is on the web at www.seaoftranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. Of course, we're on YouTube all the damn time. We got that Forgotten Favorite show coming up. I'm going to try and squeeze it in real soon, all right? If not today, tomorrow morning. So we'll see you then. Bye-bye.